Striped sweaters are a wardrobe staple. Whether you're visiting your favorite store or you're online looking for a pattern to knit yourself, you're bound to get deja vu from the amount of striped sweater lookalikes. Because of this, you can encounter major decision fatigue when you're deciding which item to buy or make yourself. As a knitter myself, I've decided I'd love to add a striped sweater to my capsule wardrobe this fall. And so in this video, I'm going to be comparing 8 different striped sweater patterns to help you decide which one to add to your collection. I'm going to be discussing needle sizes, yarns, shoulder constructions, the different prices of the patterns, and the actual sweater quantities themselves. And then at the very end, I have a special Google Sheet to share with you all, comparing all of the patterns that we've discussed today. And I'm even going to intersperse some really fun pictures and charts to help us make our decision. Our goal here is just to help us decide the key differences between these sweaters so we can make an educated decision when we decide to make one. If you're new here, hey, what's up? My name's Jackie, and this is Jacqueismaking, a place where I talk all about the knit garments that I'm creating. I love navigating the ups and downs of creating with all of you. So for today's video, our plan is to go through each of these 8 patterns. And I didn't really have a particular order to go through, so I think what I'm going to do is start with the fingering weight sweater, and we're going to work all the way up to an Aran weight sweater. And there's about 5 DK ones in the middle, so that really makes up the chunk and the bulk of these sweaters, but we'll just kind of progress through there. To preface this video, I will be stating the prices for all of these sweaters in a size large. I like to pick a mid-range size just for all of us to see what would be a general payment of this sweater if you were to use the designer's recommended yarn. I will also let you guys know that all of our patterns today are going to be top down and in the round. So to get started today, we have the Samsø Sweater by Pernille Larsen. This sweater is knit with just 1 strand of fingering weight yarn, and it's by far the most summery type of sweater I have in this collection today. The gauge for this sweater is 28 stitches by 38 rows over 4 inches. And it is knit with Knitting for Olive's merino, which is a 100% merino wool. This pattern was released of January of 2021. And so not only is it the smallest weight of yarn, but it's also the smallest needle size using a 3mm or a US 2.5 needle size. The price for this pattern is $6.74. For this sweater, you would only need 7 balls of the Knitting for Olive, which would be about $70. So not only is this sweater the lightest, the smallest needles, but it's also the cheapest. So with those smaller needles, it might take you the longest to knit, but it is going to be the cheapest sweater and it's going to be a good summery option. So that's something to weigh already. What's a little bit weird about this pattern is the amount of ease isn't stated. It does look oversized to me, not a ton oversized. I feel like looking at it, I'm kind of guessing around 4 inches of positive ease, but you guys will have to let me know what you think as well. Both the neck and the body finishings are all done using a half twisted rib, and the neck is flat. I think that this pattern in particular does look just very standard, very simple. There's not really a lot of creative interest in it. It has short ribbings. It is a half twisted rib, so that's something that's a little bit different. But to me, this just looks like a very standard and classic design. And again, it's in that light fingering weight. So I just picture this as something like light and easy to throw on, almost similar to what I'm wearing today, where this is very summery looking. That's how this piece looks to me, just like something you would throw in your bag, and that would be perfect for those of you in warmer climates, or if you're wanting something for these summer months, this would be a perfect option for you. Next, we're already getting into those DK weights. Again, I said there's going to be 5 sweaters in this category. In 4 of these DK weight sweaters, you're just going to be holding 1 strand of yarn, and 1 of them you are holding 2 strands of yarn. So first I'm going to go through the ones holding 1, and then I'll end with the one holding 2 strands. But to begin with, let's start with the Marseille Sweater by Petite Knit. Again, this is a DK weight sweater knit with 1 strand of yarn. The gauge is 21 stitches by 32 rows over 4 inches. And this is knit using Sandnes Double Sunday. So their Sunday yarn is a fingering weight, and Double Sunday is the one that is the thicker of the two. And that's also a 100% merino wool. This pattern was released in March of 2024 and is knit using 4mm or US 6 size needles. The price for the pattern is $6.74. And to knit a size large, you would need about 15 balls of that, so that would equal $165. The amount of positive ease that she recommends for this sweater is 9 3/4 inches. It features a drop shoulder with 1x1 rib, and the collar is a 1x1 rib that is folded down, so it has that little bit of a thicker look. To me, this is one of the sweaters that actually inspired this video. The sweaters that I showed you in the beginning, the ones that we're seeing that were popular at like Madewell, J. Crew, all those stores starting last year, that design where it is more of like the blocked on top, where you're having a plain sweater up until kind of the top of the bust, and then it has the stripes descending down. That was just a very, very trendy style within the stripes universe, if you will. So before we were seeing stripes all over, it was very trendy to have that sort of blocked style. So when I saw this sweater, I was so excited because this was one that a lot of my friends were wearing ready-to-made ones in the office, and this was one that I could make. I was actually able, when I was in Wool & Co. in Illinois earlier this year, I was able to see a knit garment made out of this in the store, and I loved the hand feel of the double Sunday. I've heard from some people that they prefer just the regular Sunday to the double Sunday. I've also heard the same thing about the Knitting for Olive, the merino versus the double. I'll have to put on the screen the names of those, but I'm not sure exactly why that is. If you guys have a preference, let me know which one you prefer as well. But yeah, this one is definitely going in the back of my mind as we're comparing these, because I think this is just such a staple look. The only thing concerning me about this overall style is just the curiosity of if it's too trendy to have one of these. I feel like I'm making this whole video with the notion that stripes are timeless, they're classic, they're not gonna go in and out of style, but I'm afraid that this sort of like stripe starting down here is going to date this look, and it's gonna look like it's a 2023, 2024 sweater. So that's the only thing that's causing me hesitation at this point. Next, let's talk about the Stripe Pipe Sweater by Veronica Lindberg. This is something that has taken the knitting world by storm, and kind of like I was just mentioning with the Marseille Sweater, the stripe pipe has definitely been a reason why stripes have been at the forefront of my mind. There's been a lot of big creators like AKA Nora Knits, Knit California, just a multitude of makers talking about the yarn that they're purchasing or the scraps that they're using to make this sweater, and so it's really been at the forefront of my mind. This sweater in particular is a DK weight sweater knit with just one strand of yarn. And her gauge is 20 inches and 31 rows over 4 inches. And she is also recommending this be made with the Sandnes double Sunday as well, just like the last pattern we talked about, a 100% merino wool. This pattern was released in May of 2023 and is knit using 4mm or a US 6 needle. And her price for her pattern is around $7.71. And if you were to purchase brand new yarn for this in a size large, you would need about 14 balls or $154. Her recommended amount of ease for this is between 8 to 12 inches, and she knit this with a twisted ribs flat on the neck, so not folded over, just the flat, and then the sleeves and body is also in a twisted rib. This design also features a drop shoulder as well, just like the last one. So just comparing right off the bat, we'll get to more comparisons at the end of this video, but you can already tell both of these, this one and the last one, both DK weight, both one strand, both Sandnes double Sunday, drop shoulders, only about a $15 difference. Both are using a US 6 needle, but with the main difference being the twisted rib finishes and one having a folded over neckline. So it's really just a preference there into what you like better. The coolest thing about the stripe pipe for me is the idea of making it scrappy or really selecting a variety of colors. So a lot of the patterns that I'm showing you today are very much so in those classic colors, like a cream and a navy or a white and a black. Sometimes like a cream and a red are these like staple stripe colors. But what I love about the stripe hype is it just like incites creativity, and people automatically think about their stash when they think about this particular pattern. They're thinking about a lot of leftover like fingering weight skeins that they have that they can hold double and use it in this. Also any DK weight yarns that they have. I've seen a lot of people purchase a DK weight like for the background color and then use scraps for the alternating color. And I really liked how Nora mentioned that this really felt like a go-to sweatshirt for her. So to me, that's what kind of pattern this is in my mind. It's not so much that staple striped sweater that you're putting into a capsule wardrobe, but more so a fun, scrappy project sweater. So that's kind of the category that I'm putting it in my mind. Next, I have for you the Albina sweater by Caitlin Hunter. And I, in particular, picked this one because I wanted to feature at least one pattern that didn't have a wool yarn. So this one, we're featuring a yarn that's a cotton and linen blend. So again, this is a DK weight sweater knit with just one strand. And her gauge here is 19 stitches and 28 rows over 4 inches. And her featured yarn here is the Ritual Dyes Undyne yarn, which is a 60% cotton, 40% linen yarn. And this pattern was actually just released June 2024. She uses a 3.75 millimeter or a US 5 needle, and her pattern is $8. If you were to use that Ritual Dyes yarn for a size large, you would need about 6 hanks, and it would be $174. She recommends about 8 to 10 inches of positive ease and features a 1x1 rib flat for the collar and finishings, and this is also a drop shoulder. This sweater in particular caught my eye with those kind of neutral shades. And then I was also drawn in, like I mentioned, with the plant fibers. And then I also was drawn in, like I mentioned, with the plant fibers for those of us who can't wear wool. I think this one, along with the first one that I mentioned, would be those best bets for a summer or a spring or warmer climate type of sweater. I love when I look at this one, the amount of drape that the yarn appears to have. It looks light and breezy and like a really good warm weather staple. I especially like too the increases on the neckline. I think they look really tailored and beautiful. And I like it looks like she features like a row of knit stitches after her ribbings to just create like an elevated, beautiful finish. So yeah, that's the Albina sweater. To me, this isn't exactly what I'm looking for because I'm wanting a more fall sweater, but I think if I were looking for something to wear throughout the spring and summer months, this would definitely be the one I would go for. Okay, so we have 2 more DK weight sweaters, and the next one that I have to feature is the Olga Sweater by Petite Knit. This is a DK weight sweater knit with just 1 strand of yarn and has a gauge of 20 stitches and 30 rows over 4 inches. And this one is made using Sandnes Pure Gint yarn, which is a 100% wool. It's not super rustic, but it's definitely more rustic than their Sunday yarn is. And this pattern was also just released in June 2024, so another new one, and is knit using 4mm or US 6 needles. And the pattern cost is $6.74. If you were to make this in a size large, you would need about 14 balls and it would be $112. The amount of ease that she recommends is $9, and the neck is a 1x1 folded over rib, and the arms and the body are also a 1x1 rib, and this is again another drop shoulder. Something that you'll notice from both the sweaters that I showed you that are in stores and the ones we've talked about today, every single one we've talked about today has been drop shoulder, so it's just a popular style. This sweater is one that I'm actually heavily considering just because it features stripes all the way to the top. I love the thickness of the stripes. It feels retro but also timeless to me, and then I also love the idea of using this pure Gint yarn. I felt it before in person and I love the texture and the wooliness of it. I also love that it has a little bit of like a tweeniness to it, just a little bit of that like texture within it. And so when I see this, it just feels like a big giant hug to me. And I love the amount of positive ease in this, and the way that it's looking in the shoulder, on her shoulder in this picture looks very fall to me, very sweatshirt type of style to me. And is really the kind of like oversized amount that I am looking for. So this is one that's definitely at the top of my list. The last one for a DK weight for us today is the Abby Sweater by Sandnes Garn Design. And this one is knit with 2 strands of yarn. One is going to be a Sandnes Garn Sunday, and the second one is going to be the Sandnes Garn Tin Silk Mohair. And the gauge for this is just 23 inches straight in the stitches and the row, over 4 inches. And this pattern was released in January of 2023 and is knit using a 3.5 millimeter or a US 4 needle size. The price for this pattern is $8.50. And for the 7 balls of Sunday and 8 balls of mohair, you're looking at around $185. The interesting thing with this pattern and with a lot of Sandnes Garn designed patterns is you have to actually purchase it from them or from a site that's also going to sell their yarn with it. So you can't really buy a pattern from them without buying like a kit, if you will, or yarn along with the pattern. The positive of this is a lot of their patterns come in booklets with beautifully designed patterns. So not only are you getting that one pattern, but you're getting multiple of them, but you are having to buy like a kit. So you couldn't use your own yarn, for example. So that's just something to keep in mind here. The ease for this pattern wasn't stated. It definitely looks oversized to me, like at least 8 inches of positive ease. And it features a 1x1 twisted rib, and it looks like it is folded down on the neck as well. And what's interesting about the sweater is it says you're slanting the shoulder, and then it has raglan increases. So yeah, it's almost like it's like starting as a drop shoulder, but then going into raglan increases. It's a very interesting construction that looks really beautiful. This one has definitely caught my eye for a long time. I like a lot of the little details of it. For instance, there is a crochet detail on the sleeve and on the hem where you're just like crocheting the very edges. It looks so beautiful. It also has a split hem on the side. And yeah, it looks like something very high-end, very expensive. So if you're looking for something that's not completely classic staple, something that's not totally cookie cutter, I think this one would actually be a really fun route to go. I think you would love this for years to come, and it would be something that would just be like special to make those little finishing touches on. Okay, so now just 2 more sweaters. We have one worsted and one Aran weight sweater. The worsted weight sweater is again by Petite Knit. I'm sorry to feature her 3 times in this video, but honestly, when I was thinking about the sweaters for this video, her patterns immediately came to mind because the stripes and this sort of vibe is really a Scandi staple that I feel like Petite Knit has nailed. And a lot of people have a hard time trying to differentiate what the difference is between those patterns in particular, which is why I wanted to feature them today. So this one is the Lyon Sweater by Petite Knit, and it is knit using 2 strands of the Sandnes Garn Sunday yarn. So that fingering weight yarn, you're just holding 2 strands of it to make a worsted weight. And the gauge for this is 20 stitches in 30 rows over 4 inches. That Sunday, like I've mentioned in this video, for some reason everyone loves Sandnes Garn Sunday, is a 100% wool. And this pattern was released in May of 2023 and uses 4 millimeter or a US 6 needle size. And the price for this pattern is $6.74. And if you were to knit a size large, you would need about 13 balls, which would equal $136.50. The recommended amount of ease for this sweater is 7 3/4 inches, and it features a 1x1 rib with the neck being folded down. This shoulder, for once, isn't a drop shoulder. It's actually just like a contiguous set-in shoulder, so it's really sitting right on your shoulder seam and looks very put together. This pattern, again, it's just so similar to the Marseille Sweater. I'm even like scrolling back and forth right now, just like, what the heck are the differences between these? And I've noted them today. You'll also see them on that Google sheet if you are to look into it. But really, it's just like there's a different of stripe placement. One you're using double Sunday, another you're holding 2 strands of just the plain Sunday. And then just the amount of ease is a little bit different and the shoulder construction is different. So I would recommend you really just like pay attention to those. Think about what yarn you want to use, and then also look at the pictures and look at a lot of the projects on Instagram and Ravelry and see what you prefer in terms of like what the ease is looking like, what people's finished projects are looking like, and what you think you'd best prefer on yourself. And then lastly for today, we have one Aran weight sweater. It's sweater number 22 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. And for this sweater, you're just holding one strand of Aran weight yarn. The Filcolana Peruvian is the one that she recommends, which is just a 100% wool. And her gauge is 19 stitches and 28 rows over 4 inches. This pattern was released in September of 2022 and uses a 4mm or US 6 needle. The pattern itself is $8, and if you were to knit a size large, you would need about 13 balls, which would equal $78. I just had to check if that was correct. That actually is correct. These come in 50-gram balls, and they're only $6 per ball. So if you can get your hands on the Filcolana Peruvian wool, I think that's such a good deal and makes it like a pretty affordable warm sweater. This pattern in particular is recommended 9.5 to 12 inches of positive ease, and it features a 1x1 twisted rib with a flat neck and a drop shoulder. One of my favorite features of this sweater is just that the drop shoulder has this like double knit kind of almost like a button band on the shoulder with those buttons. So again, it's something really unique. This one, along with the Abby sweater, I'm just giving you something that's just ever so slightly different in case that's something that you're interested in. I also love there's like a knit band around the neckline that's so beautiful, and the way that she interchanges colors, like she has one color for ribbing and then just like an edge color, kind of like if you saw earlier in the stripe pipe where you just add like a little pop of color after the ribbing. I think that just looks so special and so cool. So now just going into a couple of the fun charts that I made, wanted to show you guys these just so you can see how all of these patterns are comparing just on like a chart type of style. So like I mentioned, you can access that Google Sheet, compare any of these stats that you want to compare, but sometimes it's nice to see it visually. So this one here is the yarn and needle size one, and I really like this because you can see right away, like if you have a preferred needle size or a preferred yarn, you know, like I was mentioning, if you really want a summer type of garment, the Samsø or the Albina is going to be a really good option because you're using a lower needle and a lighter weight yarn. So what's interesting from this chart is you can see with the Samsø, it's going to be a tighter gauge because you're using a light yarn, but you're also using a smaller needle size. So it's going to result in a fabric that's going to be a little bit tighter versus the Albina one. While you're still using a lighter yarn, it is a DK, but it's going to be in that cotton linen blend. You're using a bigger needle, so it's going to be an open gauge. So it's going to have just a more open and airy knit versus the tighter gauge of the Samsø. That's kind of fun to look at and compare and contrast on this chart. I also liked, you can see I have like my 3 clumping right here, and really the 5 at that very end. There were so many sweaters that are knit using that US 6 size needle. So if that is one of your preferred needle size, for me, that's one of my favorite needles to knit with. You can see these are all the sweaters that you're going to be using in that size. If you want a project that's going to work up super, super fast, maybe you're going to pick that My Favorite Things knitwear sweater. And then as you go lower, they're going to be the lower weights of yarn. So that one's kind of fun. And then the second one that I made is just for prices. I know a lot of times for my viewers that price is something that you're concerned about. And obviously with all the patterns that I've mentioned today, you do not need to buy the yarn that is recommended for these patterns. You can go to your stash or you can buy a yarn equivalent that is cheaper. But just, you know, for comparison's sake, maybe you can think, you know, even if I am buying an alternative, a lot of times it might like reflect similarly to this if you are buying a cheaper yarn. So you can see here we have the pattern prices on one end, and then we have the sweater going from $50 to $200 on the other end. So Our most expensive sweater with pattern and pricing for the yarn is going to be that Abby sweater by Sandnes Garn. And then we have our cheapest ones being the My Favorite Things knitwear and the sweater number 22, and then the Samsø sweater down there as well. So by far the Samsø sweater is definitely the cheapest with both. The one thing that I'm noting in particular are both the Marseille Sweater and the Olga Sweater, the two that I think personally are my top two that I'm choosing in between. They're both falling in like a pretty affordable range, I think, to me, when compared to a similar sweater I'd be getting commercially. So I'm really liking where those two are falling. So yeah, that is my comparison today of those sweaters. I hope that you guys took something away from today and you learned and we figured out some of the differences between a few of these sweaters that you've been looking at. I know for me personally, I've kind of looked through a lot of these projects. I looked through a lot of these sweaters. I've also tried to compare and contrast what would be good for me going, looking forward, 2-3 years. Instead of just thinking about what's trendy right now, what would be a staple item for me that I know I would wear for many seasons to come. I'm kind of thinking my top spot right now for that is that Olga sweater. It just looks very classic to me. I think the stripes aren't something that's trendy, it's something that's classic, and I like the idea of using a little bit more rustic of a yarn. So personally, that's my pick. But I also absolutely have in the forefront of my mind the stripe pipe sweater, especially with so many other people making it and inspiring me. I'm kind of thinking I'm going to keep it in the back of my mind as I accrue more yarn like in my stash and I have just leftovers. I'm keeping it in the back of my mind to perhaps one day combine some of those colors and make a really scrappy and fun stripe pipe sweater, because I'm thinking that's really the fun of it, is using scraps, or perhaps like if I'm in a new shop and I see a color I absolutely have to have, maybe I get that and then I like curate other colors around it. It's kind of my plan for the stripe pipe. And then yeah, for right now, I don't really have a super need for like a springy or a lightweight stripe sweater, but I absolutely love the idea of like a pullover that's more like nautical-ish, that is a summer garment that you can put over dresses, and it's just beautiful. And so I can definitely see sometime in the future me casting on one of those lighter or summery weight garments. But that's just not something that I'm looking for right now, so I'm keeping that out of my mind. And then lastly, those ones that do feature the color block, like starting later, I personally think that's a trend that's going to go out of style and it's going to start to look dated. Because we saw it in stores last year, I think we're going to see it in stores again this fall. And then what do they say? Like trends usually cycle maybe a couple years in stores and then it starts to look dated. So for me personally, I'm a little bit going more towards designs that I can see as being more timeless instead of trendy, just because we already saw it in a past cycle. So I'm trying to do like where if I haven't completely, like if I'm seeing it in stores now, it's the first season we're seeing it in stores, I'm more apt to make it versus seeing it last year and then this year. I know it's gonna die sooner than later. It's also like completely just a personal opinion. I personally like have so much fun finding trends, seeing what's new and happening. I am an elder millennial for sure, and I'm not good at keeping up with trends. So the little bit that I can try to keep up, I will at least try for now. But yeah, I hope that you guys found today's video interesting. If you did, please give this video a likes up so I know to make future comparison videos. If you have any ideas for me of patterns where you just can't decide what to make because there's so many things that are giving you decision fatigue, there's too many lookalikes, let me know down below. I'd love to make another one of these videos for you, make you another Google sheet, and really help each other make a good and informed decision. I hope you have a good rest of your week. Bye-bye.